Hello, everyone. It's time for another session here at the New Year New Language Summit. We're nearing the end, and I hope you've had a great time. We're always looking for feedback for how we can improve it, so please be sure to send that in either in the comments field or send me a message or an email, and we'll be happy to hear it. Today, I'm joined by my friend Mark Pentleton from Coffee Break Languages, and it's one of the longest running language podcasts in the world with hundreds of millions of downloads. And they have the series of languages called Coffee Break Spanish, Coffee Break Italian, so on and so forth, where you can learn the languages in the comfort of your ears with Mark's soothing voice. So he's a great one, and today he's going to be talking about how you can fill in the gaps of your day with some language learning. So when you have some downtime or time where you otherwise couldn't do other things, maybe. So and there might be a little hint to the podcast here, but we'll let him explain all about that. Enjoy this session with Mark, and I'll see you in the next one.
Thank you, Chris. I am delighted to be here for the New Year New Language Summit. It's been a fantastic week so far. I've really enjoyed watching many of the presentations, and I hope that you're looking forward to this presentation on how to maximize your language learning by turning your downtime into your do time. Now, my name is Mark Pentleton. I am the founder of Coffee Break Languages. And over the past 15 years, we've been helping learners all over the world take their first steps in learning a language and indeed taking much further steps into becoming intermediate learners and advanced learners of a number of languages. We have Coffee Break French, Coffee Break Spanish, Coffee Break Italian, Coffee Break German, Coffee Break Chinese, Coffee Break Swedish, and Coffee Break English. And the idea in all of these courses is that you can learn a language when you're doing something else in your downtime. You can learn a language while you're walking the dog, or while you're at the gym, or indeed while you're on your coffee break. And over the next 30 minutes or so, we're going to be looking at ways in which you can maximize that downtime, maximize that time that you have available to fit language learning into your life. Now, I'm going to ask you a question, and although this is a pre-recorded presentation, I'm going to ask you to enter your answer to this question in the chat. Now, by the wonders of technology, I will also be in the chat in the future because this is pre-recorded, but I'll be really interested to read your answers in the chat. And I'm going to give you 1 minute to answer the following question. And the question is, what is the biggest obstacle you face when starting to learn a new language? Okay, so 1 minute coming up now. Okay, now if that went according to plan, you have written your answers in the chat, and I'll be in the chat in the future, and I'll be really interested to see your answers. But this is a question that we have asked our Coffee Break community of learners many times. And I'm going to go through some of the answers that they have provided to this, which I'm guessing are going to be some of the similar answers to what you have provided to this question of what is the biggest obstacle you face when starting to learn a new language. So, one of the obstacles is fear. The fear of being able to do it, doubt that you will be able to learn a language, use that language effectively. Another challenge that people find is finding the opportunity to practice the language that they're learning, whether that be speaking to native speakers or to find the correct materials, the books, the texts and so on. Another common problem is maintaining your motivation. Yes, it's fantastic when you get started, but keeping that motivation and that enthusiasm for the language going can be sometimes quite a challenge. Another challenge that people often find, another obstacle, is the expectations that you may have of what being able to use that language will be, or indeed past experiences that you may have had using or learning the language before. Very often, some of us have experiences learning a language back in school, and sometimes those experiences aren't always positive. Sometimes they're very positive, but equally for many learners, the experiences that they've had of learning a language in school can be less than positive, let's say. But perhaps the most common answer to this issue of what are the biggest obstacles you find when learning another language is finding the time to spend on that language. And that's what we're really going to be focusing on in this session. It's going to be a very practical session. I'm going to give you basically a blueprint to help you maximize your language learning over the next 20 or 30 minutes or so. So let's begin by looking at the first point of this presentation. And that is all about, let me see if I've got this here, it's all about planning ahead. So my first piece of advice to you is about planning ahead. And when I say planning ahead, I don't necessarily mean plan everything that you're going to achieve in learning a language. Instead, I'm talking more about planning your sessions, planning your learning. So not necessarily scheduling in all of those sessions over the course of a week. That's something that you could definitely do, and we'll talk about that in a moment. But what I'm thinking about here is more along the lines of planning your session. What are you actually going to do in the learning session that you have planned? So planning ahead, and not necessarily thinking about your schedule, but planning ahead and thinking about the lesson that you're going to take, the session that you're going to manage. So I'd like you to think about planning those learning sessions. Sometimes you may have time available in the day. Perhaps you are an early riser and you like to spend time first thing in the morning on your language learning. Or perhaps you have time at the end of the day. Perhaps you like to do it at the end of the day when you're lying in bed and you do a little reading or you're working on an app or something like that. But what often is the case is that there are often time-wasting sessions that we all have during the day. For example, maybe you finish your lunch and you think, I could read the newspaper, or I could perhaps do some scrolling through social media to find out what my friends are up to. All of these little time wasters. They're not necessarily time wasters, but time that we could be spending doing other things. And what I would like to suggest is that those times are times that you could be valuably learning a language. You could be using that time to do something useful and to work on your language. And we'll be looking at the different types of activities that you can fit in to those 15-minute sessions over the course of the presentation. So we've got planning ahead, and not necessarily planning your full schedule, if you like, planning your learning sessions. And another aspect of planning ahead is where you're actually going to make sure that you've got everything that you need in order to learn the language during your session. So having your kit, your language learning kit with you, that may mean that you take your notebook with you when you're going out, so that you've got a notebook ready to use when you have a 15-minute slot or a 5-minute slot available. Or it may be making sure you've got the apps downloaded on your phone that you're going to use, or the podcast episode that you're going to listen to. All of this is crucial to planning and planning ahead to have that information, have that content, or have that app or the kit, as I say, with you ready for the session. The thing is, you never know when you're going to have an opportunity to do so. So, for example, if you miss the bus, then sometimes we think, I've missed the bus, I'm going to have to wait 10 minutes. What will I do? Probably get your phone out and start flicking through your phone. But that is an opportunity to do some language learning if you've got the content ready to do. So if you've got that planned, if you've got your podcast episode downloaded, or if you know what YouTube video you want to watch, then that means that you'll be ready to do some language learning in those little surprise times that come available. So be prepared for the opportunities which may arise. Okay, so that's tip number 1, planning ahead. Let's think on and look at tip number 2, and that would be about sticking to a routine. When you establish a routine and when you follow that routine, that is when things really begin to stick. That's when you're able to consolidate your learning more effectively. So let's look at my thoughts about sticking to a routine. First of all, I would suggest that you stick to the same time each day for your learning. If you can possibly identify times during the day that fit your life, then if you stick to them, it will improve your consolidation. It will allow you to make a better attempt at learning the language and sticking to the language. And it really helps you avoid breaking your routine, breaking your streak, if you like. So first of all, sticking to the same time. Secondly, building up a pattern of learning, and crucially, trying to get your learning to fit around your life. Perhaps you've got family commitments that you need to do at particular times of the day. Perhaps you visit relatives. Perhaps you deal with your children. Perhaps you are going to your work and you have to work at a particular time. But what you can do is try to fit all this learning around your life and try to ensure that perhaps, as again, planning ahead, you have the podcast episode downloaded on your phone in case the Wi-Fi on the train isn't working or something like that when you're on your way to work. So by building the learning around your lifestyle and being able to fit that learning into the slots of time that you have available, you'll be able to stick at it and build that routine that bit more. And I would suggest that you experiment with different times. Perhaps try learning first thing in the morning and see if your brain is ready for learning that early in the morning and if you're able to maintain that and stick to that. Or perhaps try on your coffee break. If you've got a coffee break at work or for a time like that, then you can use that time to spend 15 minutes on your language learning. And again, we'll be looking at some practical examples of what you can do in those 15-minute slots a little later. The other very, very important thing I would suggest is that sometimes it makes much more sense to break up your sessions rather than trying to fit in one session of 1 hour on a Thursday evening because that's what fits your life. Why not do 4 sessions of 15 minutes on a Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday and Friday? Now, are you going to become completely fluent in a language in 15-minute sessions every day? Perhaps that will take you some time. But the fact is, every little bit of 15 minutes is going to be much more effective than infrequently spending 1 hour on the language. So multiple short sessions often work much better than single longer sessions. If you can stick to these, if you can stick to your routine, then you've planned ahead, you've stuck to your routine, you're already on the correct route, on the right route to building your language skills. Okay, next up, I would suggest that you set yourself goals. Now, you can set goals in multiple levels, on multiple stages, if you like. First of all, if we consider session goals, the first goal I would like you to think about is the session goal, your session of learning. What are you going to achieve in this session? You've set aside 15 minutes tomorrow after lunch. What are you going to achieve in those 15 minutes? Or you've set yourself, perhaps you're going to listen to a podcast while you're out on a run, or you're going to watch a YouTube video while you're making dinner, something like that. But what are you going to learn in that session? If you've built your routine, if you've set your routine and you've planned ahead, you know what is coming up, then you should also have a goal for what you're going to achieve during that one session of your learning. And it can be a simple goal, and indeed it should be a simple goal, and it should be achievable. The key element of any goal is making it something that is achievable. Now, in addition to this, you can set weekly goals. So, for example, what I like to do when I'm coming to work in a different language, I've had the opportunity to work with many languages, and one of the languages I'm working on at the moment is Norwegian. And what I like to do on a Sunday evening is plan out my 15-minute sessions over the course of the week. So I know what sessions I'm going to be working on, and I know what I would like to achieve in those sessions. So Sunday evening for me is an important time to get myself organised, not just for the coming week of work and so on, but also for my language learning over the course of that week. So think about session goals, think about weekly goals, And of course, think about longer term goals. What would you like to achieve in the language down the line? Think about how you would imagine yourself using the language in a month's time, in 6 months' time, in a year's time, and really try to put yourself into that situation. Imagine what it feels like to be able to use the language confidently in different scenarios. It may just be ordering a coffee successfully when you're on a vacation, or it may be doing a presentation at work or something. It depends, of course, on your own motivation and your own purpose for learning the language. But do try to set these longer term goals. And all of these goals, I would suggest, write them down. Use your notebook and write down the goals that you are trying to achieve. And I think I would almost say that this is part of the language learning process. It's almost more important, it's not more important, but it's very important, equally important as the work that you're doing in the session. So if the language learning work that you're doing in the session is paired with the goal setting and following up on those goals and the note taking on your progress, then that is what is really going to make a difference. Let me just check that I've got the right button here. Yeah, so goals help routine. Having these short, medium, and long-term goals will help you stick to this routine that you've established. And it means, again, that you'll be consolidating your learning better, you'll be achieving the learning, and you'll be recognizing what that learning is over the course of time. Okay, so far we've been looking at planning ahead, we've been looking at sticking to a routine, and also at setting goals. Let's have a look at the next piece of advice I have for you in terms of how you can maximize your downtime and make your language learning more effective, making that your do time. So the next one, let me see, the next one, this should be number 4. Yep. This may seem a little strange in a sense. This one, I'm suggesting that you treat yourself. Now, what do I mean by this? I mean that you should try to make your learning special. Try to make the perfect environment for learning. That may mean finding the perfect spot at home, or going to your favourite coffee shop, or making the perfect cup of a lovely fruit tea, or a perfect cup of coffee, or something that you enjoy eating or drinking. But making the learning special will help you look forward to the learning. By choosing the perfect environment, you will look forward to your learning and you'll recognise it as a good time of the day rather than something that's complex and something that's a burden and a chore. Also, think about the toolkit that you have. So you may want to treat yourself to a new notebook. I love notebooks. I'm a bit of a notebook collector, and I have notebooks for all the different languages I'm working on, and I like preparing them with different sections for the vocabulary that I'm learning, the grammar exercises that I'm doing, the notes that I'm taking on the films I'm watching or the apps I'm using, and so on. So if you're a notebook person, then treat yourself to a new notebook, or use your favourite pen. And if you're not that kind of person, then make sure that you're using an app that you enjoy, to take notes in, or anything that you like to make your toolkit an enjoyable toolkit to use. And again, is making your whole learning experience more enjoyable. Because enjoyable tends to mean easier. If you enjoy something, it's easier to do it. Your motivation is higher. So if you can help your mind associate learning with pleasure, then it will be easier to stick to your routine and, of course, plan ahead for further learning. So number 4, a little bit a strange one if you like, but it is treat yourself. Make sure you're enjoying your learning. Okay, we're going to now look at some very practical advice for different types of skills that we practice when we're learning a language. So we'll begin with reading. Let me come back here. And we're going to focus on reading first of all, because reading is an absolutely key element of language learning. One of the key things of when you're learning a language is about getting lots of input, lots of content to help you experience that language. And one of the easiest ways of doing that is by reading the language. And it's very easy to find content to read. But what I would suggest is that you should read for pleasure. Don't read something that you don't find interesting. Find content that you find interesting, that you would find interesting in English, and then read about that in the foreign language that you're remembering, that you're learning. So The key thing here is that you don't need to understand everything. You can read a passage, and even if you're only picking out 2 or 3 words to begin with, then you're still experiencing the language. You're seeing the shapes of the words. You're seeing how the words link together. You're seeing punctuation. You're seeing the way in which accents may be used. Or if you're learning a language which uses another script or which uses a syllabary, then you're experiencing the way in which the language works. Now, the other key thing about reading is that you need to find material that interests you. I remember very clearly when I was at university many years ago, studying languages in Glasgow in Scotland, and the only access that we had to up-to-date French or Spanish or Italian content, the languages I studied at university, was through newspapers which arrived 3 days later on train from France, Italy, and Spain. And they came to a newsagent's on Byers Road in Glasgow. And I remember going to the newsagent's and buying my 3-day-old copy of Le Monde. And that was the only access I had to up-to-date materials in French to read. Of course, now it's very different. We can access everything we need on our phones, on the device that we carry with us everywhere we go, and we can access daily new content on any topic. And that's why I would suggest find something that interests you. If you're interested in sports, find sports news, and even start by looking at the results of football games, for example, and you're going to familiarise yourself with certain aspects of vocabulary. If perhaps you are interested in travel, find information about the places you want to go. And remember, it doesn't necessarily need to be a place where the language is spoken. If you were interested in travelling around your own country, for example, if I were going up north in Scotland, I would find plenty of information in a language I am learning for travellers from a country where that language is spoken who wish to travel to the north of Scotland. So it's always possible to find content that is of interest to you in the foreign language. But please remember that you don't need to understand everything. Sometimes when you're reading about a topic that you're familiar with, it means that in fact you're understanding all the more, and you can start to recognise words even if you may not necessarily know what the word is. You'll recognise a word because you know the context, and therefore you're able to use that and recognise it more easily. Another suggestion I have is if you can find plays or graphic novels, comics, in the target language, then this is a really good way of using reading to help you build your knowledge of the spoken language. Because remember that a play is the words that people would speak, and the graphic novel involves speech bubbles, and that's the words that people are speaking. So it's a good way of seeing the language that is spoken, but seeing it in a written form before you start to try to understand the spoken form. So I would definitely suggest you consider looking at plays or graphic novels. And I would also say this is a little bit controversial because some people don't agree with easy readers and looking at easy language written for learners. But I very much believe that this is a very good way of building your language skills and keeping your motivation high. So if you're using materials that are written for learners, then you're going to understand more and therefore be more happy about what you're learning. So it helps to keep your motivation high. It helps you to build the language skills that you need at your particular level. So if you're just completely new to learning a language, then you will find very basic, easy readers and also many websites which provide, for example, news in easy the language that you're learning. Again, I mentioned I'm learning Norwegian just now, so there's a website called Klartale, and there is news on that website in simple Norwegian, which helps me understand it. Therefore, I'm motivated to continue. But one of the most important aspects of reading is you should always try to read material that's just a little above your current level, because that way you're always improving and you're looking up words, you're taking a note of them in your nice new notebook. And that way you're building your knowledge because it's just a little more than your current level. If you're reading it and it's too easy for you, then you're not really going to learn as effectively. So I would definitely say consider these easy readers. So there are some tips on reading, and I hope you find these useful. Let's look at another skill, and that next skill would be listening. Now, the first of the tips that I have for you here is, again, a little bit controversial because some people don't agree with this. I'm suggesting that you slow down the listening. Now, what I mean by that is using the controls on your device or on the platform, for example. If you are listening to a podcast or watching a YouTube video, you can slow down very easily the audio. We'll slow down the video if you're watching a video, clearly. And that way you'll just have a little more time to pick up what people are saying. Now, obviously, if you're listening to something at half speed or three-quarter speed, it's going to sound a little unnatural, and that's not really how the real world works. Because very often, if you are in a situation when you're in the country where the language that you're learning is spoken, people will speak quite quickly at you. However, my key point here is that it's not cheating to slow down the listening, because in real life, it's very often possible to ask people to speak more slowly. So as you're getting more used to the language, use the tools that technology provides and slow down the listening until you're more comfortable with it, and then that way you're building your listening skills. Now, it's not all about slow listening. It's not all about listening all the time to slow content, because what you're trying to do is reach this, what I call the magic boundary, the magic boundary where you can suddenly begin to understand things more easily when you're listening to spoken materials. And what I mean by this magic boundary is when you begin to recognize where one word ends and the next word begins. When someone is speaking, if you can start to recognize that when they're speaking quickly, or indeed if you're listening to a podcast and you slow it down, and you start to recognize where one word ends and the next word begins, this is when you begin to see the spoken language. You begin to imagine what it looks like in your mind, and that in turn may help you understand what the words mean because you may have seen them in your reading. So when you can reach that magic boundary, that's when the listening is really beginning to work. But as I said, it's not all about listening to slow materials. That is definitely a method I strongly believe in. But it's only when you combine it with listening to content at normal speed too. So normal speed is crucial because what you're doing there, even if you're not understanding it, is you're listening to the intonation, the rhythm, and the pronunciation of the language. And even if you're not understanding much of it at all, you're still picking up that style of speaking, the way in which it's spoken by a native speaker. So do the slow listening, but also combine that with normal speed listening. And that combination, I think, will be very successful for you on listening. Okay. What is our next topic? Well, this is a strange image for our next topic. Believe it or not, our next topic is speaking. So why is there an image of a shower when I'm talking about speaking? Well, the reason for this is because I think the best way of practicing speaking, especially at an early stage when you're learning a language, is by talking to yourself. And you should fill your day with opportunities to speak. So start in the morning, in the shower. When you're in the shower, talk to yourself. Tell yourself some words that you've learned the previous day. Or tell yourself perhaps what you're going to do that day. And filling the day with opportunities, by the time it gets to the end of the day, when you're lying in bed at night, think back through what you've done during the day and tell yourself the story of your day. Now, if you've just started learning a language, you're probably not going to know how to say, I am going to do such and such. I will go to see my friend today. Or you may not know how to talk about the past if you're looking back on the course of your day and say, today I had dinner with a friend and then went to the cinema. You may not know these expressions or these verb tenses and so on. But what I think you will know, or you can practice in your other sessions, is preparing some of the words and phrases that you may need, that you may be able to concoct for these opportunities of speaking. So what I mean by that is perhaps you don't necessarily know how to say, I went to the cinema, but you may know the word for cinema. Or you may be able to say, I go to the cinema in the present tense. Now, if you said, today I go to the cinema, and it's 10 o'clock at night, and you were telling this to a native speaker, I'm sure that the native speaker would understand that you mean today you went to the cinema, because you've got the verb to go in there, went is linked, it all makes sense. So try not to get too hung up on the idea that you can't say exactly what you want to say. Instead, think of it as an opportunity to try out what you can say and work around things. So, for example, if you want to talk about your nephew, but you don't know the word for nephew, then you could say your brother's son or the son of your brother. It's a way of getting around the words that you perhaps don't know. So, a key thing then is simplify where necessary, breaking the language down and using the words and constructions that you do know, and doing that, practicing it when you're talking to yourself, because that is the adaptability that you need to develop for real life speaking. So I would also suggest that you rehearse conversations, and this may again seem a little strange in the car. When I'm driving in the car on my own, I have a lot of conversations, practice conversations, which I may never have in life, but trying these conversations out, and I imagine not just what I would say, but the possible answers that someone else would say back to me. So if you're rehearsing these conversations, you're practicing what you're going to say, you're practicing also anticipating what the other person would say in return. And not just one answer, but they may say this, or they may say that. They may say something completely different. And if you've rehearsed all of these, if you've anticipated all of these ahead of time, then you're perhaps going to be in a better position to understand things in real life when it happens that you're having the conversation for real. And one final thing about speaking, and this is a suggestion that I think is really useful, and that's use your voice notes app on your phone and record yourself. First of all, to check your pronunciation. So record yourself and maybe listen to something and then you try to say it. Or if you've got a course that you're working through, then listen to what is being said, maybe even record what is being said on your podcast, pause it, and then you try to say the same. And then listen to both of them back and decide whether you have pronounced that effectively, or is there something that you can work on there. It's a really good way of checking your own pronunciation and improving that pronunciation too. Another tip for using your voice app, your voice notes app, is when you can actually, it sounds a little strange, but what I do is record one half of a conversation on my voice notes app and then play it back and answer myself in the other part of the conversation. Again, it sounds perhaps a little strange, but it's really effective. So, for example, if you're working through a course and you have a conversation in the course that you're working on, then why not record each part of the conversation, but just to part A, and record all of that, and then play it back on your phone, and then speak the answers of part B, or make up your own conversation. That's equally effective. But these are different ways in which you can do all of this, obviously, these little bits of practicing in those 5, 10, 15-minute sessions of time that you have during your day. Okay, another key skill of learning a language is, of course, writing. So for writing, again, I've got some tips here that you can squeeze into your day, you can fit into your downtime. And the first of these is a key one. Write every single day. And it's something I try to do. Write something in the language I'm learning every single day, even if it's just one sentence or a few words. Perhaps it's writing down again the words that you've learned yesterday, just to recap and consolidate them. But if you can write every single day, every single bit of writing will be effective and it will help you remember what you have been learning. There have been studies done on the physical act of writing and the fact that that itself increases recall. There was a recent study where some learners were using an app to take notes on words that they were learning. Other learners were writing it down in real writing in a notebook. And those who used the notebook were learning and recalling the language more effectively because the physical act of writing things down increases that recall. So I would definitely suggest that you try to write things down, and even if you're watching something on TV, or if you're watching a Netflix show in the language you're learning or something like that, some of the words that you recognise, write them down. Even if you know them already, write them down, because that will help to consolidate what you're learning. And I'd also like you to think about how you can create the language. How can you write in the language creatively? So perhaps you could consider writing a diary, as simple or as complex as you want. So again, you can be thinking about today cinema, or you could be thinking today I go cinema, or you could be thinking today I went to the cinema and it was fantastic. I saw the most wonderful film with my friends and so on. So you can make it as complex or as simple as you want and as fits your level right now. And absolutely crucially, one of the great things about writing things down is that you can see how far you've come. You can track your progress. And remember about setting those goals that we talked about earlier? Well, as you write things down and you can go back and look at what you've written previously, you'll see the progress happening. You'll see how much you've developed and how far you've come. Now, we're in January at the moment, and it probably is the case that wherever you live, there are probably diaries on sale in shops, and perhaps they're even discounted at the moment. So why not buy yourself a cheap diary and then start writing a little bit in the language that you're learning, again, just a few words. And then when you get to December and you've done this every single day, think about how much progress you'll have made. You'll be able to look back in January and see, oh yeah, I learned maybe 3 or 4 words then. But by December, I'm able to write in sentences and perhaps even do that whole, I went to the cinema today with my friends and we watched the most wonderful film. So that is a really important way of tracking your progress, of looking at how well you've progressed over the course of time. So some tips there on writing. Now there is one other area of language learning, I think, that is very important and equally something that can very easily be done in your downtime, and that is focusing on vocabulary. So there are many ways to look at vocabulary, and many things that we've spoken about already have aspects of how you can improve your vocabulary. But first, what I would suggest is definitely use vocabulary apps. Things like Duolingo or Drops. They're 2 of my favourite apps for learning vocabulary and building your confidence in the language. And of course, they're always gamified, so you are able to build your confidence in the language, and you get rewards and badges and all this kind of thing. So there's a lot of motivation involved in using these kind of vocabulary apps. However, don't forsake the other activities by just doing your 10 minutes a day to keep your Duolingo streak up. Make sure you do that as well as your other activities. So when you're using these apps, you'll very, very often see kind of odd examples. And some people complain about that. Some people, there are lots of memes and so on which focus on the strange phrases that you might see on one of these apps. But actually, these strange phrases will help you to remember the language more effectively. When you've got a peculiar phrase and you wouldn't maybe use that in real life, but you will definitely remember it. So don't worry about these odd examples that you get in the apps. Think about flashcards, another way of practicing vocabulary. You can make your own flashcards with note cards and so on. Or, of course, there are many digital versions of flashcards. And one of the great things about the digital flashcard apps is that they very often use what's called spaced repetition. So the idea is that you are repeating particular words at certain intervals, and that is done just at the right time, so that you are able to learn these words just as you're almost about to forget them. You consolidate them further, and that makes them go in that bit more. So loads of different flashcards apps out there, but again, I would say the idea of writing your own flashcards again reinforces that idea that if you're writing things down, you may well recall them that bit more. And write again. So this is what I'm saying. Even if you are using vocabulary apps, if you're doing your flashcards, if you're listening to a podcast, or if you're watching a Netflix show or whatever, then use your notebook to write down all this new vocabulary to reinforce your vocabulary acquisition. So we have looked at reading and listening and speaking, talking and writing, and also at vocabulary. But there's one other area that I think is possibly the most important aspect of language learning, and that is be patient. Be patient with yourself. Be patient with your progress. Be patient with the language. Sometimes it can be frustrating, but It's through that frustration that we learn, and through that frustration that we improve. So let's think about this. When you're learning a language, you're actually kind of rewiring your brain, because the language may work in a different way to the language that you're used to, or the languages that you're used to. So be patient as your brain understands these new concepts and basically changes your view of the world. It does take time, and you need to give it time to benefit from that. I would definitely say ignore the hype. Ignore this idea that you're going to be fluent in a week or fluent in 3 months. There are many ways to improve your language learning quickly. I don't really believe in quick language learning, because I think language learning is something that you start and you enjoy and you keep doing. I am very comfortable speaking in French and Spanish and Italian and other languages, but every single day I'm learning new words. Every time I use them and speak to native speakers, I'm learning new words. So you don't stop learning at a particular point. Learning continues. But if you accept that you're not going to be fluent in a week or a few months, then it lets you concentrate on the process of getting there. And I think that's really key. And another thing that's really key is the fact that mistakes are good. It's good to make mistakes, because it's only by working through these setbacks that you'll actually make the progress that you need. There's a lovely expression in Italian, and it's sbagliando si impara, which means by making mistakes, you learn. And that's what exactly you need to do. You need to make those mistakes in order to continue learning. And laugh at your mistakes. Enjoy making the mistakes. Very often they're the subject of funny conversations with friends that you will make through your language learning journey, as you tell the story of how you got something wrong, and the funny things that resulted as a result of that. And perhaps the most important element here is that language learning is a journey. It's something that takes a lot of time. And if only you focus on the destination, you'll miss everything that's going on around you. Think of it as a train journey through many countries and experiencing all those different cultural aspects. Think of it as learning the language as you meet new people and as you make new friends. And if you only focus on getting to the end of your journey, you'll miss everything that happens along the way. So be patient with yourself, be patient with the language, and that way you will make the progress. So we've gone through 10 elements here. I suggested that you plan ahead, that you stick to a routine, that you set goals, both immediate goals, mid-term goals and long-term goals, that you treat yourself so that you can look forward to your learning, that you read the right stuff that is suitable for you, that you listen regularly, both to slowed down content and to normal speed content, that you speak to yourself, that you write every day where you possibly can, that you build your vocabulary as much as possible, and most importantly, that you be patient. And perhaps adding one further thing in here, I would suggest that you enjoy it. Have fun with the language, and enjoy the whole process. So there you have it. That is my suggestions on how you can maximize your downtime and make it into your do time, transform it into your do time, and become a better language learner by fitting different aspects of language learning into your day. If you'd like to find out more about what we do at Coffee Break and how we can help you learn a language on your coffee break, in your downtime, at the gym, walking the dog and so on, then do visit coffeebreaklanguages.com. We have courses in a number of languages for absolute beginners, working all the way up to advanced learners. We are on Instagram, Coffee Break Languages. You'll find us on Facebook, Coffee Break Languages, or Coffee Break French, Spanish, German, and so on. We are on YouTube, Coffee Break Languages, and our Twitter account is Coffee Break Lang. And again, there are accounts for Learn French, Learn German, Learn Italian, and so on. And just one final thing, and that is I've mentioned our courses, all the Coffee Break courses here. And basically what we would like to do is offer you a special offer, and that is you will get 20% off any of our courses with the code NYNL. And that is for the next 2 weeks. So that will end 2 weeks from today. I think that is Friday the 21st, if I'm not mistaken. So Friday the 21st of January, you'll get 20% off with the code NYNL for New Year, New Language if you visit coffeebreakacademy.com. And just at the checkout, just enter NYNL if you would like to learn a language with us. Thank you very much indeed. I hope that you've enjoyed this. I hope that you enjoy the rest of the conference and that you enjoyed all the presentations that have taken place over the past few days. Thanks again for watching this one. Thanks to Chris for the invitation to take part. And I wish you well with your language learning, and I hope that you can make your downtime into your do time. Thank you very much.